Imagine this. You've planned the perfect trip, a chance to explore new cultures and landscapes. But as you review your travel plans, you discover that certain countries have closed their doors to American visitors. What's driving these restrictions, and why are these specific nations no-go zones? Stick with us as we explore the top 10 countries that Americans are advised or prohibited from visiting in 2025. From political tensions to severe safety risks, there's a complex story behind each destination that you won't want to miss. In today's video, we'll uncover the most restricted countries for Americans, diving into the political, social, and security factors that make each destination unique. These restrictions are more than just travel advisories. They're windows into global conflicts, rivalries, and challenges. Let's begin our journey through these high-stakes locations and learn why they've become places of high caution or outright prohibition for U.S. citizens. Country 1. Russia. The political landscape in Russia has shifted dramatically, placing it at the top of the list of countries where Americans are highly restricted from traveling in 2025. Russia's strict surveillance of foreign nationals, especially Americans, has only intensified amidst strained U.S.-Russia relations. With tensions rising due to political conflicts, Americans in Russia face the risk of being detained or questioned over alleged espionage or politically sensitive activities. Travel advisories from the U.S. government strongly warn against visiting, citing not only the risk of arbitrary detention, but also the limited support available from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow due to diplomatic cutbacks. Beyond the political dangers, safety concerns also make Russia a less attractive destination for American travelers. Heightened security measures and increased monitoring mean that American visitors are often subjected to strict scrutiny. Even simple interactions with locals can be viewed with suspicion by Russian authorities, and arrests are not uncommon for minor infractions that may be overlooked elsewhere. This atmosphere creates a tense environment for travelers, where Americans may feel like they are constantly being watched or targeted, a far cry from the typical travel experience. Despite Russia's rich history, impressive architecture, and natural beauty, its stringent restrictions on Americans cast a shadow over its appeal as a tourist destination. As long as U.S.-Russia relations remain strained, the risks of traveling to Russia are high. American citizens who are detained or face legal issues in Russia often have few resources available for assistance, making Russia a challenging destination to visit safely. Until political tensions ease, Russia will remain an off-limits country for many Americans seeking to travel abroad in 2025. Country 2. Venezuela. Once celebrated for its vibrant culture and breathtaking landscapes, Venezuela is now considered a high-risk country for American travelers. Decades of economic hardship and political turmoil have made Venezuela increasingly dangerous for foreign visitors, especially Americans. The U.S. government has issued a do not travel advisory due to the risk of crime, civil unrest, and government hostility toward U.S. citizens. For Americans visiting Venezuela in 2025, the lack of security and political tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela heighten the risk of detainment and violence, especially for those perceived as critical of the government. One of the primary dangers for Americans in Venezuela is the rampant crime. Kidnappings, robberies, and violent crime are prevalent, especially in urban areas like Caracas. Foreigners are often viewed as easy targets, and Americans are no exception. Many basic services, such as medical assistance and emergency support, are limited, which can quickly turn minor problems into major emergencies. Furthermore, public infrastructure and law enforcement have deteriorated significantly, leaving Americans even more vulnerable in times of crisis. For American travelers, the dangers in Venezuela go beyond everyday crime and extend into political risks. Tensions between the Venezuelan government and the U.S. have led to the arbitrary detainment of several American citizens in recent years. As political instability continues, Venezuela's challenges make it a risky destination for those carrying American passports. Although Venezuela's beauty and culture may attract curious travelers, the dangers currently outweigh the rewards, making it an unadvisable location for Americans to visit in 2025. Country 3. Iraq. Iraq, home to one of the world's oldest civilizations, is now one of the most dangerous places for American travelers in 2025. Decades of conflict have left Iraq struggling with instability, terrorism, and violence. Although Iraq's security situation has improved slightly in recent years, the U.S. government still warns Americans of the serious risks involved in visiting, including the threat of terrorism, armed conflict, and kidnapping. Political tensions and the presence of various militant groups make Iraq a highly volatile location, where foreigners, especially Americans, face significant threats. The security concerns in Iraq are compounded by the limited resources available for foreigners in times of emergency. In many areas, Americans are advised to avoid even basic travel within the country due to risks from criminal networks and hostile local militias. Extremist groups continue to operate in various regions, targeting not only military forces, but also civilians and foreign nationals. This lack of security infrastructure creates a highly unstable environment where travelers could face immediate threats with little or no warning. Despite Iraq's historical significance, particularly its ancient archaeological sites, visiting Iraq remains highly discouraged for American travelers. With U.S. government advisories in place and a complex political situation, Americans have little support should an incident arise. For those hoping to experience Iraq's rich culture and heritage, it's wise to wait until conditions are more favorable and security can be better ensured. Until then, Iraq remains a country with too many risks for U.S. citizens to safely explore. Country 4. Iran. Iran's stunning architecture, rich history, and vibrant culture might seem appealing to curious travelers, but political tensions between Iran and the U.S. have placed it on the restricted list for Americans. Due to these tensions, the U.S. government has issued travel advisories cautioning Americans against visiting Iran, where the risk of arbitrary detention is significant. Iran's government has detained multiple American citizens in recent years, often on charges of espionage. For Americans, this unpredictable environment makes Iran a high-risk destination in 2025. Beyond the threat of detention, American travelers face severe limitations in Iran, including strict surveillance by authorities. Iran is known for closely monitoring foreign visitors, especially those from the U.S. Any perceived criticism of the Iranian government can lead to questioning, harassment, and even imprisonment. These risks make it challenging for Americans to enjoy a comfortable travel experience in Iran. Even day-to-day activities such as taking photos or conversing with locals can attract unwanted attention from authorities. While Iran's cultural sites and natural beauty might attract many, the political climate between the two countries has made it a challenging place for Americans to visit safely. Given the high risk of detention and limited diplomatic assistance, Americans are advised to reconsider any plans to travel to Iran. Until relations improve, Iran remains a high-risk destination where American citizens are at significant risk of facing complex legal and political challenges. Country 5. Afghanistan. Afghanistan, once known for its stunning mountainous landscapes and rich cultural heritage, has become one of the most dangerous places for American travelers. Following the U.S. military withdrawal, the Taliban regained control, creating an uncertain and volatile environment. The U.S. government strongly advises against travel to Afghanistan, citing risks of terrorism, kidnapping, and armed conflict. In 2025, the unstable political situation and severe security threats make it nearly impossible for Americans to travel there safely. The dangers in Afghanistan are not limited to specific areas, as instability affects nearly every region of the country. Extremist groups and criminal organizations operate with little restriction, increasing the risk of violence and kidnapping for foreigners. Americans in particular are high-profile targets, and any travel within Afghanistan is fraught with security concerns. With limited access to resources and assistance, American citizens face heightened risks in a country with few protections for foreign visitors. Although Afghanistan's landscapes and historical sites are breathtaking, the realities of traveling there make it a nearly impossible destination for Americans. The U.S. government's warnings reflect the severe dangers that await those who attempt to visit, especially given the lack of support for foreigners in emergencies. Until there's significant improvement in security and stability, Afghanistan will remain one of the most dangerous places for Americans to visit. Country 6, North Korea. The enigmatic Hermit Kingdom of North Korea has long been off-limits for American travelers, and 2025 is no exception. Since 2017, a U.S. travel ban has prohibited American citizens from entering North Korea due to the high risk of detention and political tensions between the two nations. North Korea's government operates under strict surveillance and harsh legal penalties, making even minor infractions potentially life-threatening for foreign visitors. For Americans, visiting North Korea comes with the constant risk of arbitrary detention or severe punishment. North Korea's restrictive policies make it difficult for any foreigner to navigate, but Americans are particularly vulnerable. The country's government views U.S. citizens with intense suspicion, often treating them as political leverage. Those detained face a legal system that offers few rights or protections, with punishments that range from forced labor to prolonged imprisonment. This lack of transparency and extreme risk is why the U.S. State Department continues to ban American travelers from visiting North Korea. Despite North Korea's unique cultural elements and historical significance, the danger for American citizens is simply too high. The severe consequences that could arise from even the slightest misstep have made North Korea a high-risk country for Americans. As long as diplomatic relations remain strained and security risks persist, North Korea will remain closed off to American travelers, making it one of the most restricted nations for U.S. citizens. Country 7, Yemen. Yemen, with its ancient architecture and vibrant traditions, was once a lesser-known travel gem. However, years of civil war and humanitarian crisis have turned it into one of the world's most dangerous countries for Americans. The U.S. government advises against all travel to Yemen due to active conflicts, terrorism, and severe political instability. For Americans in 2025, Yemen remains off-limits, with heightened risks that include the possibility of kidnapping, attacks, and extreme violence as armed groups operate without restriction. The security concerns in Yemen extend beyond its conflict zones, impacting nearly every region of the country. Terrorist organizations and extremist groups are prevalent, creating a hostile environment for foreigners, particularly Americans. Infrastructure has been severely damaged, meaning basic services like healthcare and law enforcement are barely functioning in many areas. Travelers face heightened dangers on all fronts, with no real support or safety measures in place, especially for foreign nationals who may be perceived as targets. Although Yemen's landscapes, history, and culture make it an enticing place in theory, the reality on the ground is incredibly dangerous. The risks involved for American travelers are severe, and with no diplomatic presence, the likelihood of receiving aid in an emergency is low. Until Yemen stabilizes and security improves, it remains one of the riskiest destinations for Americans, making it wise for U.S. citizens to avoid travel here altogether. Country 8. Libya. Libya, a country with stunning coastal views and ancient ruins, has become one of the most challenging destinations for American travelers due to ongoing political instability and violence. Since the fall of its leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, Libya has been in turmoil, with factions competing for control and extremist groups exploiting the instability. The U.S. government advises against all travel to Libya due to severe threats of terrorism, armed conflict, and kidnappings targeting foreigners, including Americans. American travelers face unique risks in Libya, where militant groups often view foreign nationals as high-profile targets for ransom or political leverage. The security situation is unpredictable, with militia groups operating across the country, making certain areas highly dangerous. Infrastructure is limited, and even basic services are unreliable, creating further complications for those needing medical care or emergency support. For Americans, these dangers create an unsafe environment where assistance is nearly impossible to find in critical situations. While Libya's cultural sites, like Leptis Magna and the Sahara, hold immense historical appeal, the risks to American travelers are simply too high. Without any stable government to ensure security, and with limited diplomatic options for aid, visiting Libya remains exceptionally dangerous for Americans. Until Libya's security situation improves, it's a country that U.S. travelers are best advised to avoid, despite its historical wonders. Country 9. Syria. Syria, once a cradle of ancient civilization, is now a symbol of the devastation that war can bring. Following years of civil conflict, the country remains highly volatile, with certain regions still experiencing ongoing violence. The U.S. State Department continues to issue strict warnings against travel to Syria due to the severe risk of terrorism kidnappings and armed conflict, making it one of the riskiest countries for Americans in 2025. This turbulent environment, marked by factional warfare and extremist groups, creates a high-stakes risk for any foreigner entering the country. For Americans, the threats in Syria are especially pronounced, as militant groups and extremists frequently target Western nationals. Beyond the threat of violence, Americans also face high risks of kidnapping, where hostages are often used for ransom or political leverage. Even with careful planning, the security situation remains volatile, with many areas completely inaccessible and lacking essential services like healthcare and law enforcement. Such an environment makes it nearly impossible for any foreign traveler to navigate safely. Although Syria is home to breathtaking historical sites, such as Palmyra and the ancient city of Damascus, the security risks for American travelers are severe. With limited diplomatic presence and restricted resources for emergency aid, the dangers of travel here outweigh the rewards. Until stability returns to Syria, it will remain a no-go zone for American travelers, as the risks simply cannot be overlooked. Country 10. Somalia. Somalia, with its rich culture and strategic location along the Indian Ocean, has unfortunately become one of the most dangerous destinations for Americans. Known for piracy, political instability, and terrorist activity, Somalia is a high-risk country where the U.S. government advises against all travel. Decades of civil war have left the nation fragmented, with many regions controlled by militias and extremist groups, making it a particularly dangerous place for Americans in 2025. For American travelers, the risks in Somalia are immense. Piracy remains a major threat along the coast, while extremist groups such as Al-Shabaab operate throughout the country, targeting foreigners and locals alike. Armed conflict is common, and the lack of a stable central government means that law enforcement and emergency services are virtually non-existent. For Americans, this creates an unpredictable environment where assistance in case of an emergency is severely limited, leaving travelers vulnerable in a crisis. Despite Somalia's scenic coastlines and rich history, the risks of traveling here are severe. Without the assurance of security or emergency support, Americans face an exceptionally high danger level, from kidnapping to terrorism. Given the security threats and limited options for aid, Somalia is among the countries that Americans are strongly advised to avoid, as the risk factors are simply too great to justify travel. These 10 countries, each with its own mix of security challenges, political issues, and humanitarian crises, are more than just travel advisories on a map. They reflect the world's geopolitical tensions, areas of conflict, and the intricate relationships between nations. While the appeal of these destinations may be strong, the dangers they pose to American travelers are undeniable, and the risks far outweigh the rewards. For now, these places are best appreciated from a distance, and there are countless other destinations worldwide where Americans can safely experience cultural richness and natural beauty. If you're curious about which countries are still safe to explore, or want to see more travel insights like these, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on this video. Where are you planning to visit next, and what places are still on your travel list? Share your thoughts with us below, and stay tuned for more global travel insights. Safe travels, and remember to explore responsibly.